All right, I'm here with Erick Meza from the Sierra Club, and my first question is: when we talk about the border in San Diego County, what are we actually talking about ecologically? What lives there and what moves through there?
Hi, Xavier. Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation to participate today and share a little bit about some of the ongoing border issues. I think really important when we talk about the San Diego area, it is really important to recognize the diversity of the ecosystems that exist on that area, because we're not just talking about one single place with one single ecosystem. Even the California US Mexico border in California is rather small in comparison to Arizona or Texas. We have the coastline, and then as we start moving east, we have the Otay Wilderness area, the mountains there, and then keep going. We got the desert after you pass the mountains into the Jacumba, all the way into the Arizona border. So the whole area just encapsulates a huge biodiversity, a lot of unique species of plants and animals that exist on that area that have been adapting to these conditions on these ecosystems since time immemorial. So having a border wall in this area is definitely going to throw a huge it's a huge concern environmentally speaking, because it's going to pretty much divide these ecosystems in two different sites, and the implications of that are going to be huge, and definitely we're going to be talking a little bit more about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you talk about these environment, well, the impact that it's going to have on the environment, do you know the actual number of the waivers that have been issued, or exactly how does, there's been a number of waivers come through to make it possible for the government to build these border walls. Can you briefly describe what a waiver is, what it takes to get a waiver, why a waiver is necessary, and the impact that's having on
Yeah.
this
Yeah,
thing?
absolutely. Yeah, these the waivers that we're talking about here actually started with a piece of legislation and that was introduced after 9/11. That was called the Real ID Act, and this Real ID Act, it came up in 2005, had a little section on it called the Section 102. And during that section, it pretty much meant that the Department of Homeland Security was given all authority to waive pretty much every single environmental law that we have in this country, with the purpose of build border barriers or physical barriers at the U.S.-Mexico border. So these laws that are meant to protect the environment, such as things like, for example, the Endangered Species Act or the Clean Water Act or the Clean Air Act, things that are so important. And it only doesn't stop there, but it also goes into laws regarding to Native American rights. For example, the the Preservation of Grapes Act and other laws that are meant to protect not only natural but also cultural resources. How many laws have been waived over time? It started with around 40. Now we're getting close to 100. So pretty much every single environmental and cultural law that that exists in this country, it can be waived at the border with the purpose of building these physical barriers. So it pretty much removes any guardrails that exist and expedite the process. So they can just throw all these waivers that they need, and that way construction of physical barriers can go much faster. They don't have to do the proper studies. They don't have to spend the time to learn about the specific ecosystem and the impacts that such construction will have at the present time and over time. So as you can imagine, this is just these are going on right now. Recent days, more waivers were announced, and they usually, when there is a new segment of border wall that is on the plans of being constructed, the Department of Homeland Security announces on the Federal Register that they're going to apply these waivers based on this Section 102 in order to expedite construction.
And this isn't the first administration to do that sort of thing, is it? Didn't
No,
Biden
absolutely.
did it?
Every administration has done it. Started with George W. Bush Jr.
Mm. The post 9/11
Yep.
legacy. So I know you're a real expert on Arizona, but can you speak a little bit about San Diego County? Like, so for people who've never walked that landscape, how would you describe what the terrain looks like and what it looked like before the first walls went up?
Well, the areas that we're talking about right now that are under construction, it is near what is known as the Otay Wilderness area. Otay Wilderness, to get that type of protection, wilderness is the maximum level of protection that a piece of land can get. So no activities such as mining or any type of natural resources being extracted are not allowed. So it is just outrageous that a piece of land that gets this level of protection, with the use of these waivers that we're talking about, they can do all these kinds of impacts, you know. The mountain there, Otay Mountain, and the range of mountains that come all the way from the north, that is the southernmost part of this range of the southern mountains of California. They are home for, like I was mentioning earlier, a very unique type of vegetation that exists in this area that is really fragile and home to unique species of plants and, of animals and insects as well. For example, there is a species of tree called the Tecate cypress that it is the habitat or the host plant for a very particular type of butterfly that lives on that area. So very fragile ecosystem that in the past has already been affected by fires. So the terrain itself on this area it is already a natural barrier. It is very hard to walk around because there are high mountains with steep canyons. So it doesn't really make much sense to build a physical barrier there because it is already a natural barrier. It is the range of mountains there make it really hard for people to navigate through there without being detected in the first place. So all this area in San Diego County, once you start removing from the heavy populated areas, it goes into these steep canyons that are very unique because they are able to get the moisture from the Pacific Ocean and create this very unique type of micro ecosystems there. There is a concern for a lot of the larger mammals because, as we know, the border barrier or the Trump's wall, the bollards have a separation of 4 inches. So lizards, snakes might be able to get through, but when we talk about deer and mountain lion on larger species that make this place home, they are not going to be able to move back and forth as they have done it since thousands of years. So so this is a very remote area and very hard to go. Not many people actually goes to these areas, and there are some trails that exist there that take you to the top of the mountain where you enjoy beautiful views, but also at the same time, if you really want to move through the landscape and go undetected, it is really hard.
Next question. Whose land is this historically and ecologically? Who has the longest relationship with it? And are those voices part of the current conversation about wall construction?
Yeah. This is Kumeyaay land. Kumeyaay has been the tribe that has occupied this territory for thousands of years. This is a binational tribe, that unfortunately has been, like in Arizona, we have also a tribe, the Tohono O'odham, that it is a binational tribe. And one of their saying is, we don't cross the border crossed us. And I feel it's the same situation with the Kumeyaay tribe in California, in Southern California, in the San Diego area. So the Kumeyaay had, in 2020, they did a series of demonstrations to oppose the border wall because it was going, some of the explosions to build the foundation of the border wall were being done on burial grounds that were sacred to them. But once again, thanks to these waivers, they're able to do that. So Kumeyaay, and as you start moving further east, then you the neighbor Cocopa tribe is in the Yuma area. And now more recent days, we got occupied for ranchers, and that's and also some of those, like I mentioned, is BLM and other Department of Interior conservation entities have been also occupying the land.
What do you mean by occupying the land?
Or administrating the land, or taking care of the land, or having some kind of use for this area.
Right on. I think I'm going to skip 4. Okay, let's go question number 5. So when decisions about wall construction get made in Washington, how much of that process involves listening to the communities and ecosystems that will bear the consequences?
Yeah, the process really barely includes the community at all. What we have seen in recent projects is, after a lot of pressure from different communities to the Department of Homeland Security, mostly from the environmental community, is that they put up a website where they announce the upcoming projects. And then we have to be closely monitoring this, because it's not like a big announcement that comes on the local news, or they reach out to stakeholders in the community. They just post it on the website, and they put up an opportunity for the community to provide comments of concerns from the community on environmental, social, and economical impacts of the construction of the border wall going on their area. So our experience with these comments is just hasn't been very positive, as most of the time the concerns that we have expressed and the community has expressed, really it feels like they fall on deaf ears. We just get an email back that says, thank you for participating, and we will keep you in mind. Thank you very much. And that's about it. But in real, we don't really see in reality, we don't really see a true engagement where people can host, like, let's say, a community meeting that they invite the people to actually have a conversation, to see what they feel, to actually have the opportunity to propose new ideas, or like express their concerns or ask questions on what do they mean by saying this or by saying that. So it has been lacking a lot of transparency every single time, and we almost have lost faith on these processes because we through history haven't heard anything back that actually was meaningful and meant something, or we felt that some of our comments were actually addressed.
Yeah, I got one of those emails back.
Yes, so you know
After
what I
some,
mean. And that's
yeah.
pretty much where it ends. It's like a dead end. You just get that email and then thank you for participating, and that's it.
Hmm. Yeah, they seem to be actually written by human. They don't seem to be like boilerplate, automatic responses. So I think somebody's actually typing the stuff up. I think, yeah, it almost sounds like at least the two or three that I've read, it seems like they've actually read some of the comments. But yeah, they're just like, yeah, thanks for doing this, and yeah, we hear we see what you're saying, but okay.
We're still doing it. So
We're still gonna build it.
yeah, exactly. So it is. There is no invitation for further discussion, and sometimes it feels like for every concern in regards of water, plants, and wildlife, there is like a specific response, and it just pretty much feels. I'm not really sure if they're actually a person or how they're doing it. Sometimes I participated in so many of these comments that it has been a different experience on different areas.
That dovetails right into my next question regarding building versus breaking. What does a 30-foot steel barrier actually do to the land, the soil, the water flow, the animals that have crossed that path for thousands of years?
Yeah, well, it is. How do I even start with that? There is just so much to really think about that I feel it's not being really acknowledged as this massive construction starts taking place. Because it is completely on. One of my friends, Miles, here in Arizona, calls it unregulated experiment in a continental scale. So we are pretty much doing this thing without any studies or any like doing any aftermath studies also of the impacts that it's having. But it doesn't really take a rocket science to start like really looking at it, and people that has been able to spend some time at the border to start observing some of the impacts. First of all, when construction goes on, it requires to bring in a massive amount of machinery, heavy machinery to these really remote sites. So that requires grading the roads. It requires, in some cases, expanding the roads. And what it takes is also like a bulldozer and all these really heavy machineries remove of the native vegetation without really, like in some cases we saw here in Arizona, it was very poorly done at the beginning because they were even bulldozing through saguaros, which is a protected species. Um,
The
so
cactus.
the saguaro cactus, yes, and which
The
is also
iconic
sacred for the
cactus.
Tohono O'odham. So, what can we expect that they start bulldozing in the new sections of border wall in California? Are they going to start bulldozing through the Tecate cypress or other oaks or trees that are less and less common every time? Just to make more roads, to bring the machinery in. Once the machinery comes in, they need to start creating an area that they call the staging station. And on these areas is where they set up the machinery that is going to mix the concrete. So it becomes like this really remote wilderness area all of a sudden becomes an industrial zone. And the noise and the dust and the devegetation all start happening at once. So it's a huge shock from the get-go. Second thing is going to start happening is they're going to need water. They're going to need water to start mixing that concrete, and they're going to probably start pumping it from the areas near to the wall site, and more likely right next to the border. So they're going to start pumping from our public lands. As we know, in some areas in the border, yeah, you might see a lot of rain recently, but that doesn't mean that we are not going through a historic drought as well in some areas. And this extra pumping of the water, it's going to affect the local water table. When you start also removing vegetation, creating more downslopes, and with these weather events, for example, that we see these big rains in San Diego recently, when you remove vegetation from these mountains, you create erosion because the vegetation is what acts like a sponge, sucking all that water, making it get into the soil. So if you remove the vegetation, now the water moves faster to the soil and can potentially cause flooding downstream, historic floods that are potentially going to happen when we're removing that big amount of vegetation. And it doesn't stop there. Now you got the water, you remove the vegetation. What happens when you disturb the soil so much, then you invite invasive species. Invasive species that come with the heavy machinery, or they're being buried on the soil, and then all of a sudden they start getting the perfect environment for them to thrive. And most of these invasive species, they're also very prone to get on fire. So we have an area already that it is on risk of fire all the time. You remove the native vegetation, introduce invasive grass species that catch on fire, burn all the native species, and what happens is that the next year that invasive fire is going to come up stronger. And of course, there is no funding for removal of invasive species, just for border wall construction. So we keep going, and then you build the border barrier. And the next thing to happen is that all the animals that were able to go back and forth on these areas are not going to be able to do it anymore. There is a very important case on the Jacumba Mountains of a binational herd of bighorn sheep that lives on that area. There was plenty of studies done in recent years that this binational herd needs to go into Mexico in the summer months because that's where they find water. They don't find water on the mountain side and the United States side. They find it in the Mexican side. So if we completely close this migration route for this binational herd, we're pretty much signing the death sentence for them if there is nothing else done. So that's an example of how this can impact. This is a very, very obvious impact, right? And then another thing they're talking about now is not only stopping on one wall, but maybe in some places adding a secondary wall. So the secondary wall, we haven't really done much studies on remote areas. I know there is a secondary wall in San Diego area, but that's a heavy populated area where not so much wildlife movement exist anymore. But now as we move these secondary barriers into the wilderness, we're creating these dead zones where nothing will grow because it will pretty much turn into a giant road, and we're going to lose a lot of acreage that was originally designated as a wilderness area. Another thing that happens is border walls not only block wildlife, but they also block movement of water. In some of the areas, they're going to be blocking the birthplace of the headwaters of the Tijuana River, for example. So if the Tijuana River, if they don't put what we know as storm gates as part of the design, when water moves through these areas, the border wall acts like a dam, because water doesn't just move just water, it comes with debris, and they start packing this debris against the border and making all these border wall plus all the debris makes this impermeable barrier that puts a lot of pressure. We have seen border wall fall down through the pressure of water. So we might see some of that again. Another thing that we have seen is because they have to, some of these mountains are so steep that when it rains, the erosion becomes so bad that the border road is untransitable. No more cars can go through it, so they have to pour concrete. So the initial investment doesn't stop on building the wall, but it will continue over time for who knows how many years on repairs to the road, repairs to the wall, lighting infrastructure, and it just keeps getting worse over time.
Hmm. Yeah, I've seen it during my humanitarian aid work along the border walls from Hakumba all the way to Otay. I traveled those roads right along the right along the wall, and yeah, you need to maintain those roads because one of the first things that happens after vehicles travel those dirt roads is you get the washboard effect, and where you get those
Yeah.
ridges. And so those need to be maintained consistently at least twice a year is what I've noticed. Um, yeah, and so like during Santa Ana's, all that dust gets blown around because it's just dirt. And when it rains, you get these large, what are they called? Gullies or
Yeah.
what are they called? Anyway, yeah, they just become like you see trenches appear out of nowhere, and then
Yeah.
after a while, those need to get repaired. And yeah, it's just such a beautiful area that gets transformed into this industrial looking prison wasteland there along the border. And I really fear for what's going to happen to Marron Valley, which is that area that you're talking about, where the Tecate River, I mean, where the Tijuana
Tijuana.
River starts. Um, I'm going to be trying to get out there to document as much as I can before they start construction out there. And yeah, so getting back to the questions, when we talk about border security, do you think there's a way to think about security that includes the health of the land, or are those goals in conflict?
I think the health of the land is a real security. If we don't have a healthy land to live on, I feel really insecure about that. This is our natural resources shouldn't be a stake for in the name of this border security. I think it's very disgraceful that we're doing this to the environment on the name of border security. I think there is many different ways that we could potentially invest all those not only millions but billions of dollars that are going into construction of border wall. There are some areas right now that there is absolutely no justification to build an extra barrier there. But if we start following the money, we will find our answer of why this barrier is being built there.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. Next question. Who profits from wall construction and who pays the long term costs economically ecologically in terms of public health? I think we know these answers, but let's hear it from you.
Yeah, I knew that question was coming, so I didn't kind of expand it on my last answer. So yeah, it's been really interesting lately on this second administration to really start looking at the who gets the contracts and how they're related to the administration. You know, it's been the lack of transparency has been incredible. I mean, not incredible, it's almost expected, you know, because we know that this is a multi-billion making business, dollar making business. So it's not about the border security. It is about a business. It is about profit. And for example, in the last round of contracts that were awarded, it was about 4.5 billions that were awarded for, and that include the border wall project going on in Otay. And just to mention that the big beautiful bill that was passed included 46.5 billions that could be used for border wall construction. So when they first announced 4.6 billions, that sounds like a lot of money, but it's like only 10% of the money that was allocated. It's just an incredible amount of money. It is obscene. And about 2.5 billions were awarded to contractors that have never built a border wall. It was just contractors from somewhere in the Midwest in the country. The only job that they have done before was detention center in Texas. So and now all of a sudden, and they don't disclose who they are, they're just called a joint venture. So it is very kind of like blurry who is actually behind these organizations. It's not like we're talking about $1 or $2 million. We're talking about $2.5 billion. So it is people should be paying attention to these things, you know, because once we start following the money, things start making sense, right? And so we have pretty much enough money right now to put a border wall from the west coast to the east coast, completely seal the entire border, and double walls in some places, you know. So it is floating barriers are part of this as well in the Rio Grande. And the contractors are most of them obviously Trump supporters that have been doing lobbying and campaigning pro-Trump so they can get those contracts in the future, like Fisher Sand and Gravel and all these large corporations.
So are there organizations or movements on the ground doing the work of defending this land that the people should know about?
Yeah, there is several organizations. One of the things that we do and we recognize is that we cannot do this work alone, and so we try to partner with local people and other organizations. We created since 2008 what we know as the Border Coalition, which is different border related environmental organizations, groups of faith, and Native American tribes that are on the border. And we kind of get together every other week to talk about some of the issues on the different places at the border. A lot of these organizations are some of the big names, such as for example, Center of Biological Diversity, that supports a lot with lawsuits. Wildlands Network has a Borderlands program. We also Sky Islands Alliance has done a lot of research in Arizona with the impacts of border wall on wildlife and the migration movement. And just to mention a few, but other organizations have supported us with law advice, legal advice. For example, ACLU represented us on a lawsuit on 2019 against the federal government, and Earth Justice as well is part of these meetings and figuring out ways that we can find legal paths to stop this madness.
And how long have you been with the Sierra Club?
Yeah, I think you missed the first question. It was about like talking a little bit about myself. Yeah, I started with the Sierra Club about close to 5 years ago. And before that, I used to do food justice work with Food Bank, doing binational work as well, doing work with farmers in Mexico and doing farming workshops in Mexico for people moving food across borders.
Hmm. So it's like a natural progression for you.
Yeah.
Right on. So last question. Amongst the doom and gloom, what gives you hope, if anything does, about the possibility of a different relationship between people, borders, and the land?
Yeah, there is definitely a lot of doom and gloom. Working on borders during this administration has been definitely heartbreaking. Every time it's scary to open up the news because we're getting bombarded every day with like a uh, new announcement of ongoing, like some of the places that we have left. And it's really important for people to understand these were the last places that were the last hope for a certain species, or these were like what we didn't talk about because it was so precious to keep it like the way it was, that it was just kind of like this secret, like the Pajarito Mountains in Arizona, or the Jacumba Mountains, or the San Rafael Valley. And then one day you hear where we are doing construction in the Pajarito Mountains. We're announcing construction in the Jacumba Mountains. So this is very frustrating, and it can make you lose hope, obviously, and you get really angry with the current and then you go on social media and read people's comments, and you see border patrol celebrating blowing up mountains, and it's just really hard to see. And at the same time, the border communities have always been very resilient and very creative and innovative. We are like those pioneer species on the ground. I always like to say that the border is like in nature, there is no wall at the border. It's something called the edge, and at the edge is where two ecosystems meet, and that is usually the most biodiverse and resilient place of the whole ecosystem. So it is really beautiful to see how the community responds and how they react. Even so, with all this doom and gloom happening, they still have the time and the energy to come out with some creative ways to respond to this in a way that includes things like art, like filmmaking, or just like radical expression, or a protest, or creating some event, or like all these different things that you can think about. They're happening at the border, and I am really proud to be a member of a border community that is really fighting hard, to make these things. We fight. We know that the fight is really hard, but we still at it, And like you said, we're not just gonna sit and cross our hands and see it. We might not succeed, but we at least gonna put up a fight. It is worth it.
Definitely. Well, thank you, Erick Meza. Thank you for giving me your time to talk about this important uh, subject. I know it's important for you, and it's become important for me within the last 4 years. And yeah, I look forward to speaking to you again.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation, and I am looking forward to go visit, and I am hopefully able to make a trip down to the California coast again and go to the beautiful Jacumba Mountains and the Otay Wilderness area, and just to mention also that these are areas, that are also the impact. It is also. There is a lot of human impact to these areas. A lot of people, as we know, has it affects the environment, but this is not only an environmental justice issue, but it's also a social justice issue, and it cannot be separated. And there's many stories that weave on this area, and it is also important to mention and honor them. And as we move forward, to figure out ways that we can transform these borders into and taking them back to these beautiful places they are, instead of just continue to destroy these beautiful areas.
Is there anything that I haven't asked that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, there's some. I want to say also that we have been working really hard to try to find ways to kind of mitigate some of the harm that the border wall does uh, for wildlife. One of the things that I was really skeptical at the beginning, but then kind of has been growing on me, is the implementation of small wildlife passages. A small wildlife passage is a modification on the border bollard. So the bollard spacing is 4 inches, as I mentioned before. So the modification is making a cut that expand the gap 2 inches on each side. So instead of being a 4-inch gap, becomes an 8-inch gap. Through a lawsuit that we did on 2019, we were able to get about 70 of them on different parts, mostly on Arizona border. And these have really, we were not really hopeful. We were kind of skeptical what was going to happen. And thanks to the monitoring of some other environmental organizations that set up trap cameras to see, it was really, I was pleasantly surprised how wildlife, if you give them the opportunity, they find a way. So we actually saw more movement than we expected in some of these areas. We see jabalina, which is a species here in Arizona, almost looks like a wild pig. We have a lot of footage of them trying to cross on the 4-inch gap and getting stuck. It's one of the saddest things. And then after they found out that there was a bigger gap on the wall, they start going through that area. And it's really interesting because animals leave a scent on the trails that they move, and others follow later. And now we have jabalina, coyotes. We've seen mountain lions cross into this. So it works for some species, but it doesn't work for all species. It doesn't work for bigger species such as a deer or a black bear. But it is something. It is a step forward of figuring out how can we apply these small modifications to the wall and try to minimize some of the impact. The impact. And for the larger species, what we have done is to try to advocate for the storm gates to be open on a full year basis, not only on the rainy season. So they can use other means to monitor, like cameras or motion detectors. But if we're able to leave these storm gates open all year long, we can see larger animals moving through the landscape, because these are located on the washes, and washes are already natural highways for wildlife. So these are the perfect spots for openings on the wall. And of course, yeah, so some of the things that we've been working on to try to mitigate some of the impact. And I think over the next few years, because we're about to lose 99% of the California border, it's going to be completely sealed. So we need to start getting creative on figuring out ways to mitigate some of the harm. Pray for a better administration that is going to be environmentally friendly, that is going to be able to work with the south side of the border, because the border has two sides and it needs to be better cooperation, needs to be conversations, talk about this shared landscape, and not only about immigration or border security, but also environmentally speaking. So this, we're hoping in the future that this is where the conversation takes place.
Thank you. Yeah, Marron Valley, that's all I can think about.
Yeah, me pregunto, I wonder if there is anything there, do you guys work with anybody? I know in Mexico I don't know any situation, because here in Arizona, we have good relationship with the Mexican side, and we throw parties. For example, in areas where there is no wall right now, we have thrown two parties where people in Mexico comes and people in the U.S. comes, and we share meals across the border, similar to what Friendship Park used to be. Now it's impossible, because the double barrier and all that. But here we are like sharing carne asada tacos, like back and forth, So it's that's kind of like the goal, to change the narrative, of like Mexico and United States can actually work together and build community. Which is, I know that has been the goal for Friendship Park, but maybe in other parts of the border, something like that can happen. That is not so fragmented yet.
So is the plan to have the border walls completed by 2028? Is that what I read?
Yeah, I can guarantee that they're working as fast as they can, because we have the hope of the midterms. If the midterms come and we have majority democratic government, we can maybe stop some of these projects, or we can resign those waivers. So, throw bumps on the road that are going to slow down this. This is like a machine right now that is like so like well greased and moving forward so fast, because they have everything on their favor. They have the money, they have all the permits, they have pretty much all the support they need. There is no way to stop them right now. But if there is a midterms that we actually can gain majority in Congress, there is a chance that we can throw some speed bumps to them and kind of like slow down them, throw that monkey wrench on this machine.
Yeah.
Like here we have Adelita Grijalba, who is a border state representative, and she's a congresswoman, and she's completely opposing the border. Well, we just need to get more Adelitas out there, and hopefully that will slow them down.
We don't have anybody like that here in San Diego. The representatives that we have, senators and House representatives, they're just so absent. I mean, they just mostly talk. I mean, I'm doing a lot of work at the courthouse supporting people who go in for their ICE check-ins or for their court hearings for their immigration status, and they've had many opportunities to help us, to support us, all the volunteers down there, and they're just invisible. They'll send out, you know,
Is it mostly Democratic or Republican?
yeah, they're fucking Democrats, dude. It's so
Yeah.
fucked up.
Yeah, it is. It is true. Like there is not much of a difference. I think that everybody's just kind of like in this neutral zone right now. They don't want to get in trouble. They don't want to lose their position. So it's a very complex issue. But right now we have all the, like, there is so much proof, that how ineffective this is. And when you bring the money value to the price tag to this border wall that is going to happen in the Marron Valley, it's like, and the amount of people that is actually crossing through there, and all of these things, it's like, for example, right now what they're doing, and I think California is leading right now. They just sue the government because the military is just expanding the use of concertina wire. So in areas where the border wall has not been built yet, so the militaries are out there doing nothing. So they give them something to do. So it is go throw some concertina wire into the mountain, and you got these Navy SEALs like carrying concertina wire on their necks and spreading them up into the mountain. So the government of California just sued the federal government to remove that concertina wire, which is great. I am going to be following up with that because I just saw it on the news today. Then hopefully try to mimic something in Arizona for that, because that's one of the biggest problems right now. I have an action alert going on that I want to get at least 500 signatures so I can make a petition to remove the concertina wire going into the wilderness, because it just looks awful. And if the intent is to stop humans, humans are not going to be stopped by a roll sitting on the ground. But it completely stops wildlife, so it is, or it can, if an animal, for example, there is other areas where deer or cattle even, so this is an area where we can get the ranchers on board that have cattle gets entangled in the concertina wire, that's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's just matter of time.
I think I signed your thing.
Cool, thanks, man. I will be doing a push, because I haven't really get much signatures. I got like close to 400, so I want to get 500. But like that's the thing. Like Border Patrol puts up a social media post with like blowing up a mountain, and there is 5,000 comments on it saying how great that is, so, and you want to have a thing on remove a concertina wire from the wilderness. It's hard to get people. I guess the bad guys are more than the good guys, and it's really frustrating, to say the least.
Yeah, very. Well, thanks again, and hope to meet you in person soon.
Yeah.
Sometime down the road.